Judges, you may go ahead and get started.
Right. Good afternoon, Washington. We're going to introduce ourselves, and feel free to introduce yourselves and your teacher or teachers. So my name is Zach Eastburn. I'm an attorney in Madison, Wisconsin.
My name is Tom Tinder, and I'm an attorney in Charleston, West Virginia.
I'm Robert Dian. I teach American government at the University of Evansville.
Hello, judges. My name is Sanvi Mehrotra, and my favorite American government leader is Representative Pramila Jayapal, as she's the first South Asian woman to preside over the House and represents our home state of Washington.
Hello, judges. My name is Quinn Kelly, and my favorite American government leader is President Theodore Roosevelt for his foreign policy philosophy.
Hello, judges. My name is Eliza Brooks, and my favorite American government leader is Chief Justice Earl Warren for his fight for equality. And on behalf of Unit 4, Tahoma High School, our advisor, Gretchen Wolfing, the state of Washington, and Unit 4, I thank you for judging us today.
All right, thank you for that introduction. We will be doing question 2 today. So I'll read the question, and you guys can kick off your opening statement. Members of Congress are not only legislators, but they are also inquisitorial and should meet frequently to inspect the conduct of the public officers. How effectively do you believe Congress has used its investigatory power? Relatedly, explain the differences, if any, between Congress's power to investigate and the power of oversight. Which power, in your opinion, is more significant? And finally, how effectively do you believe Congress has used its oversight powers? You may begin.
Thank you, Judge. Everything is about accountability to the American people, accountability of the executive branch, and accountability of the oversight of Congress. Former Senator J. Rockefeller.
Although Congress is effective in its use of its investigatory powers for the first 150 years, beginning with the McCarthy hearings 70 years ago, Congress has used its investigatory powers increasingly ineffectively.
Article 1, Section 1 grants all legislative powers to Congress, which implies the power to investigate. The Supreme Court established in Watkins v. United States that the power of the Congress to conduct investigations is inherent in the legislative process and enables Congress to remedy defects.
An example of effective use of the power to investigate in the early years of the United States is the Pecora Committee. This was an investigatory committee which resulted in the Securities Exchange Act of 1934, ensuring greater transparency in the stock market and mitigating the effect of fraudulent trading.
Effective use of investigatory powers continued into the Red Scare in the 1950s, when the McCarthy hearings resulted in the needless destruction of many people's lives. Since the McCarthy hearings, Congress has strayed further from effective investigations, partially caused by party terrorism, as stated by President James Garfield.
A modern example of ineffective investigations due to party politics can be seen when Republican Party leaders forced the committee in charge of investigating Hurricane Katrina to redact a portion of the report because of the blame it placed on Republican Michael Brown, whose neglectful actions as Undersecretary of Emergency Preparedness and Response caused numerous deaths.
Congress's use of the investigatory power was effective for a time, but has been ineffective in more recent years.
While the power to investigate and the power of oversight are both implied powers given to Congress in order to fulfill the legislative duties, the power of oversight more specifically pertains to Congress's authority to monitor and, on occasion, influence the actions of the executive branch. Because the executive branch overreaches the modern day, the power of oversight is more significant.
In his book, Considerations on Representative Government, philosopher John Stuart Mill stated, the proper office of a representative assembly is to watch and control the government. Two significant ways in which Congress can check the executive branch through oversight are with impeachment trials and the power of the purse.
The power of impeachment, enumerated in Article 1, Sections 2 and 3, gives Congress the authority to remove any federal officer from their position and to disqualify them from holding future office. The threat of removal should be a powerful force in regards to slowing the overreach of the executive branch.
The power of the purse, enumerated in Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 7 and 8, should be the most complete and effectual weapon in regards to the enforcement of laws, as stated by James Madison. Using the powers delineated in the Congressional Budget and Impoundment Control Act of 1974, Congress should be willing to utilize oversight by removing funding from agencies that take unauthorized actions.
With over 400 active executive agencies, the ability to defund powerful entities that have exceeded their authority should be a crucial responsibility for Congress.
Although the power of oversight has the potential to be significant, Congress has not been effective in its use of oversight due to party politics and unwillingness to fully exercise the power of the purse, exemplified by the second impeachment hearing of President Donald Trump and the budget of the Food and Drug Administration.
In a statement addressing the conviction of President Trump, Senator Ben Sasse declared, Congress cannot lower standards simply because it is politically convenient. Despite these sentiments, the vote for impeachment in both bodies of Congress is almost entirely down party lines.
2011, Congress passed the Food Safety Modernization Act, which required the FDA to change to a risk-based rule for food safety. However, the FDA finalized a non-risk-based rule.
Despite this disregard, Congress passed a budget that increased the funding of the FDA by 8% the following year, showing Congress's unwillingness towards using monetary incentives to execute its oversight powers.
Despite the ample powers granted to Congress, the increasing prominence of political parties has obstructed the legislative branch's ability to use their investigation and oversight powers in an effective manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the investigation power at a broad level. I understand you went through a list of a number of things that the legislature can do to investigate and also oversee. Are there limits on Congress's ability to investigate?
One limit on Congress's ability to investigate was established in the Supreme Court case, Quinn v. United States. In this case, written with the opinion authored by my favorite Supreme Court Justice, Chief Justice Earl Warren, it was written that Congress cannot force them to testify. This can be seen during the Iran-Contra affair, where Oliver North pled the Fifth Amendment more than 40 times, after which Press Secretary Dan Howard stated that while Congress wished that he had been able to speak, they respected his Fifth Amendment rights.
Another example of a limit on Congress's investigation was established in the Supreme Court case Kilburn v. Thompson. It was established that neither House of Congress has the ability to probe into the affairs of private citizenry.
In the court case Watkins v. United States, the court acknowledged that the Fourth Amendment guarantees against unreasonable searches and seizures, which is also applicable to congressional committees.
Thank you. Has Congress given up any of its powers to either the executive branch or the judicial branch, or lost any of its powers to those two branches?
Despite the Wars Powers Act, Congress has given up some of its powers enumerated in Article 1, Section 8 to the executive branch. This can be seen in the drone strikes ordered by President Barack Obama.
Another example of the legislative branch acquiescing its abilities of legislative power would be the fact that Supreme Court rulings are now considered law, and the legislative branch hasn't really done anything to correct that perception. In Oberville v. Hodgins, the Supreme Court declared that same-sex marriage was indeed constitutional, and people say now that same-sex marriage was legalized, even though there's been no legislation that officially legalized same-sex marriage.
I'd also like to argue that it seems like that Congress has kind of lost their power, their influence over the power of the purse. And this was seen when President Donald Trump announced a national emergency on the southern border to gain access to funds that Congress did not allow him to get in order to fulfill his campaign promise of building a wall on the southern border. So this is an example of executive overreach on the power of the purse.
Thank you.
I'd like to continue down that line if I could. You've told us that Congress has failed to use its power effectively. I'd like to hear more about why it's failed to use that and why has it behaved so badly. Is it just partisanship, or is there anything else at work?
Another reason besides partisanship that prevents Congress from being effective is the president's influence over the media. During President Trump's presidency, almost every day there was a new headline in the newspapers, major papers such as the New York Times, about President Trump. However, unless they are major players, and even if they are major players such as Mitch McConnell, senators and representatives rarely have the same influence as presidents. This can be seen over time with the bully pulpit and FDR's fireside chats.
my personal opinion, I think partisan politics are the biggest culprit in the fact that the legislative branch can no longer function as effectively. And I believe that this is due to partisan agenda. Since President Joe Biden took office 4 months ago, there has not been a single bill to pass through Congress. And this is arguably because he has the same legislative and policy agenda as the legislative branch does, except for the fact that executive orders are not subject to minority dispute and pressure like in the legislative branch.
So let's talk about executive orders. Are those, is that a violation of separation of powers?
Yes, sometimes executive orders are a violation of separation of powers, especially when they are done in a manner that is done to circumvent the legislative branch. An example of this is President Barack Obama's executive orders regarding healthcare after the Congress indicated that it was most certainly not going to pass that.
The Supreme Court acknowledged in Youngtown Tube and Sheet Co. v. Sawyer that sometimes executive orders are indeed an overreach of Congress and an overreach of the executive powers of the president. Executive orders come from Article 2, Section 2, in which they are to take care the laws be faithfully executed. However, because of executive orders such as 9066, there has been a definite overreach of executive orders.
Can Congress do anything about that?
Congress can pass legislation that overturns executive orders, and executive orders can also expire.
So what is your idea about dealing with this hyper-partisanship that is impacting our government and our country?
The best way to impact hyperpartisanship would be to institute a civil discourse and civic ed class in high school. As a high school student myself, I see firsthand what it's like for political polarization, especially on social media. However, in this class, I have seen discussion between classmates and people with different political ideologies that I have never seen before, and it gives me a lot of hope. And I think that if we were to mandate that at a federal level, then we would ensure that all citizens look at the goals for America, not just the goal for their political party.
One way in which I believe that partisanship can be checked would be through the emphasis of respect. It can be seen in the most recent presidential debates that the political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, no longer respect each other and often are open and do mudslinging techniques. However, in the other debates, such as the debates between President Barack Obama and Senator Mitt Romney, there was more respect and there was less polarization.
A solution I'd like to give is introducing the initiative referendum process to the federal level. The initiative referendum process is seen in the Washington State Constitution in Article 2, Section 1. And I feel that a well-designed referendum process might cut through existing partisan divides, as it allows for the people to vote for policy rather than on party lines.
Thank you.
If time permits, I'd like to hear a little bit about the confirmation process. Is that a useful way for the legislative branch to try to influence how the bureaucratic agencies perform?
The confirmation process could be a potentially useful way for the legislative branch to influence. However, again, because of party politics, it is simply not. Either the president gets his pick or Congress uses stalling techniques in order to prevent the president from his cabinet from working effectively.
Example of this is the recent confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett. Many across the United States believe that she was a perfectly qualified candidate, and yet Democrats in the Senate fundamentally believe that simply because she was a Trump nominee that she shouldn't be on the Supreme Court.
I don't know how much time we have left, so we can ask another question. So if are confirmation hearings serving the purpose that they should be serving today?
Confirmation hearings are definitely not serving the purpose that they're supposed to, because as we stated before, it is much more about partisan politics. An example of this, can I finish my?
Yep.
Example of this would be President Obama's attempt to nominate Merrick Garland, but this was prevented by those Republicans in the Senate that wanted Trump to pick a nominee.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, everyone. we're going to give some feedback here, and I guess I'll just take it from the reverse, starting with your question and answer, because I was very intrigued by it and sort of caught off guard because I was listening intently. And so this last line of questioning, sort of probing around the advice and consent clause, and I thought you guys did a really good job, really kind of drilling down on the hyper politicization of the confirmation process. And you're touching on, so really, what is the purpose of the advice and consent clause? Is it should people just be looking at qualifications, and if a person's qualified, then yes, and regardless of politics, that person should be confirmed or not? And I thought that you guys gave a really good answer to that question. So I was very intrigued by that. Switching gears for a second, and I'll come back to your question and answer, going to the opening statement. You guys had a very clear thesis from the beginning, which is a distinguishing feature oftentimes in these things, that Congress has these powers, but they've been using them increasingly ineffectively. And then that was sort of the interpretive lens that you use to then base your entire opening statement on from that point on. So I thought that was a strong way to start, and then you kind of just carried it through with some examples that we hadn't heard before. So this issue of power of the purse, and this has come up a couple of times now, where this is supposedly a check that Congress has on executive agencies. What you did, though, was to say, yeah, this is a check, but it's not really used. Here in 2011, there's this Food Safety Act that was passed, and what did the FDA do? They said, we're not going to do that. But then what did Congress do? They didn't decrease the budget. They didn't keep it the same. They increased it. So sort of an interesting real life example of how that's not used. So I really top marks for that. Sorry, just looking at this, there were other examples that were used that I really appreciated that I hadn't heard before, with regard to what are some of the and I forget which question this was to, but you guys were talking about the mandatory civil discourse class and initiating a referendum process and tying it to the Washington State Constitution. I thought that was a nice flair for you guys, and also a distinguishing feature. There was something that I would think about in the future. It would be for certain questions, where it's like a yes or no type question. Obviously, stake a position, but then it would be nice to see if there would be some disagreement. So, like, if one of your colleagues says, well, here's how I think about, some of the, I'm trying to think of which question it was, but whatever the question is, here's my position, and then it would be nice to see, like, one of your colleagues, like, well, actually, respectfully, I disagree, and here's the counterpoint to that. So, you guys clearly understand the issues, and that throughout the wealth of examples that you guys gave, that's clear. So that would have just showcased it just a bit more. But overall, excellent presentation. Every question we had, you had just this like cornucopia of Supreme Court cases and historical constitutional examples. So well done.
I was impressed with the investigative powers that you demonstrated right from the get-go. How did you know that I was going to be one of the judges? And so you started out with a quote from Senator Rockefeller. How'd you know that? You had me right there when you mentioned Senator Rockefeller. He appointed me to a commission when he was governor here in West Virginia. But anyway, be that as it may. Excellent. Just superb. It was like, and I mean this in the most positive way, it was like turning on a fire hydrant full blast. I mean, you just brought all the facts and more facts and examples, and you just, and the other thing about it was you all were an excellent team. There's no weak link, there's no strong leader. You're all excellent, outstanding, equal partners in this We the People program and the presentation that you made. You just, I could go over all these things that you mentioned. I mean, Katrina, what a great example. And going back to the SEC back in 1934. I mean, you had great points, and you illustrated them with outstanding examples. It was just very, very well done from top to bottom. And of course, I asked that question about what should we do about partisanship and respect and civic ed classes, and then you brought in something that you're familiar with, the initiative in state of Washington. You also might have wanted to mention term limits and some other things, but you just did just a wonderful job. Congratulations to you. Thank you for an outstanding presentation, and it will be a big disappointment if the three of you, instead of having Washington as your home, have Washington, D.C. as your workplace. It would be wonderful to have you in Congress representing your state and doing what's right for our nation. Please don't let this be just a class that you took and you're on to other things. You all have a tremendous amount of knowledge and great leadership skills, and please utilize them as good citizens for decades and decades. Congratulations. Thank you very much. Good luck.
I'll concur with that. The killer for me wasn't Rockefeller. You had me at Earl Warren. Right out of the gate, I'm a fan of Earl Warren, so I was prepared to hear the rest of it. And you even quoted a couple Warren cases in there. Terrific job, a very thoroughgoing presentation. I like the way you juxtaposed the way it's supposed to work, or it was intended to work, and the way it does work in practice. And a lot of the promises made in the Federalist Papers and at the Philadelphia Convention never panned out the way they were supposed to. And there's got to be a reason for that. And the one quibble I might have is that partisanship ends up being an all-purpose answer to everything. That if we could just get rid of parties, then everything would be hunky-dory, and it wouldn't, because Madison told us liberty is to faction as air is to fire. So it's sown in the nature of man. I'm not sure that it's fair to say that recent partisanship is the problem when even your own presentation talked about James Garfield describing party terrorism at a time long prior to that. So partisanship has been around a long time. The spirit of faction has been around, and the sort of institutional incentives that make Congress loath to use the power of the purse or the impeachment power, that predates the current polarization that we have. So there's probably more to the story. There's no doubt that polarization is troublesome and maddening, and it needs to be fixed, but it's not, that wouldn't get us out of the woods. There's other sort of structural, institutional things. I thought the answer about why Congress always gets outflanked by the other branch, the mention of the media was a very strong answer, because that's been true for a very long time, going back to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt discovered Mondays. He was an expert at exploiting media attention, and every president since has gone out of his way to dominate. And Congress is never going to be able to hold a candle to a unitary office holder. And so they're at a disadvantage, even though on paper they've got lots of power. So a very sophisticated presentation, very thorough. I'm very proud of the work you did today, and I wish you all well.
Thank you so much.
Very much.
Thank you.